Welcome everyone. It's amazing. I think I saw we've got about 35 attendees at the moment. We had about 150 people who responded, so that's amazing. So let me just introduce myself. I'm Meryl Ford. I'm from the CSR, and at the moment I'm a facilitator for the whole SANBA network. So I'm very excited to welcome you to the first online executive training course on blockchain. I hope all of you are safely ensconced with your family. And just remember, for those of you that are not actually working at the moment, it's a huge opportunity to learn and grow. It might be a bit frustrating, you might have a bit of cabin fever, but it's an opportunity to be with your family, to connect, maybe not physically, but definitely digitally. So as you can imagine, the past 2 weeks have been pretty hectic for us. I think we started off with plan A, went on to plan B, C, D, E, F, because everything was literally changing on an hourly basis. So we had to rethink and replan multiple times. What I want to do is also just thank the Field Institute and Blockchain Academy for rolling with those punches. I mean, it was really quite stressful for everyone. And thank you for coming up with such an amazing platform that we are able to use, and we are able to learn and grow, as I said. Actually, when the wax undersea cable went, I thought, oh my word, that, you know, there's no way we can actually continue. But, you know, our plan G actually is going very well. If you do have any connectivity problems, please let us know. This will be recorded, so you will be able to kind of view the videos at a later stage. Before I leave you, just a message about the facilities. So the toilets are just down your passage. Snacks will be served at your location, and lunch is in your dining room. Okay. Enjoy, everyone. Live long and prosper. Thank you.
Thanks, Meryl. Okay, everybody. So let me begin by introducing myself. My name's Barbara Dale Jones. I'm from the Field Institute. And as Meryl said, we stepped in along with the Blockchain Academy and rolled with the punches to get something happening today online. This is very much the new world of learning that we're in today. So we're experimenting. We're using GoToWebinar. There's a large group of attendees that we're expecting over the course of the next 2 days. And I think we're all just going to have to experiment with this and ensure the kind of discipline and engagement that's required with distance and online synchronous learning of this kind. You'll see from your dashboard and your control panel that there is a way in which you can indicate raising your hand. So please, if you'd like to ask a question, if you'd like to say something, raise your hand and we will take your question or your comment at the earliest opportunity. You've also got a space for questions and chat where you can make comments or questions in writing rather than speaking those. So please keep engaging with us, keep sending us questions and comments. Raise your hand, as I said, if you'd like to ask something. And we're hoping for a really engaged, dynamic session today and tomorrow. We're starting now and going on until about 11:30 today, and the same tomorrow. And just to say that the purpose of this training is to provide you with a general overview of cryptocurrencies and blockchain technology, and provide you with a really good foundational knowledge of how this technology works. Today, the focus is going to be on the training and the content part of it, getting you up to speed with what the foundational principles and dynamics of blockchain are. And then tomorrow we'll be looking at a series of case studies, very interesting case studies, absolutely fascinating speakers who are prominent leaders in the field of blockchain and cryptocurrencies. You'll see from the program, which is also shared here in the handouts section of your dashboard, who those people are, and we'll be introducing those to you tomorrow. So we encourage you to stay with us over the 2 days, really be engaged. This is an opportunity for us all to learn together. But in the meantime, I'm going to hand you over to the presenter today, who is Karel de Jager from the Blockchain Academy, and he's going to be taking you through the training. So Karel, I just want
Thank you, Barbara.
hand over to you.
Thank you, Barbara.
Thanks, Karel.
Thanks for the introduction, guys. And yeah, like Barbara said, my name is Karel de Jager, and I would like to reiterate what she mentioned. Please engage with us today. This is also a pilot for us. It's a first because of this little protein floating around in the air. We were forced to do this. This type of training is usually done in a classroom setting. I absolutely love that. I love meeting all of you guys. I wish I had the pleasure of meeting all of you guys and getting to know your faces and your names. I can at least see the names. Yeah, I see there's one or two of my friends. Hello to you guys as well. Hello, Paresh. I'm going to ask you all of the difficult questions, so you better stay awake. Yeah, so the rest of you guys, usually what we do when we start off is we go around in circles and introduce each other and really get to know each other. But there's a bit of us, I mean, that'll just be a mess if we do that today. With all of the webcams and so on. So let's see how this goes. We will see, we need to interact with each other throughout this next 2.5 hours as we go along with the training. So please make use of all the tools in this wonderful program that we're using, GoToWebinar, like Barbara said, and you can raise your hand, you can ask written questions. I'm going to try and divide my attention between the presentation and the questions as much as I can. I only have so much screen space and so much mental capacity, but I'll see what I can do and then answer as many of them as I can. I'm also going to be asking you a lot of questions, so try to stay alert. Many of you might still be in bed. Try to keep the eyes open and keep the mind clear, and let's see how much we can learn today. So at least I'll have the opportunity to present myself to all of you. My name is Karel de Jager, and I am actually an engineer. I'm educated as a chemical engineer with a master's degree as well. But that is not my passion. I don't like that so much. My passion is blockchain. I've been involved with this technology for close to 4 years now. And when I first discovered it, my mind was just blown. You know, I've always had a love for entrepreneurship. Economics, macroeconomics, and money in general. I always liked money, and you know, obviously being an engineer, I also understood maths. I still understand it quite well, and I kind of liked it. I didn't really know I liked mathematics that much until I discovered then blockchain, which kind of mixes economics, money, the theory of money with mathematics and complex engineering. So when I discovered this, it instantly became a passion of mine. I couldn't stop reading about it and studying the technology. And then I started with the Blockchain Academies. They needed someone to present the courses in Joburg, and I raised my hand and I started doing that, and I absolutely loved it. So today my job is to really dig into this technology as much as I can, try to analyze it on the lowest level possible, digest it, and then make it simpler and present it to corporates like yourselves, to let you understand what the strengths and the weaknesses, and very important, the limitations of this technology is, in a way that you can go and apply it in your industries as well. So that's what I've been doing for the last 3 years or so. Absolutely love it. This is now the first time that we're doing an online training at this capacity. We've done online training in the past, but not really to so many people like we're doing today, as many people, and not when there was an undersea cable break as well, and when everyone is working from home. So if there are technology problems, just bear with me. I do have backup connections. I have several of them. I've done so many speed tests this morning. I've tried my Rain SIM card, and then I tried my Vodacom SIM card, and then a Telkom SIM card, which I have as well. And then, but every time the speed tests come out differently. So the results. So currently I'm on the Rain SIM card. It looked like that one would be the fastest. If there's any break in connection, I'm sure the moderators will let me know on WhatsApp. You guys can let me know via the text box if you don't, if my voice or my webcam or my presentation is not that clear. And then just give me a couple minutes while I switch SIM cards and connections, and then we will be back up and running again. But hopefully none of that will happen. So yeah, let's start with the training. So you guys should all see my face at the top and the presentation just below me. Okay, so we're going to start off by explaining on a very high level what blockchain is, where it came from. And you'll hear me talk a lot about Bitcoin today. I know in some cases Bitcoin is a swear word for some industries, for some companies. But I find it very, very difficult to explain this technology without mentioning the word Bitcoin. In fact, I like to let you guys understand what Bitcoin is on a very deep level. And then when you understand how Bitcoin works and how how the Bitcoin blockchain operates, then it's very easy to extrapolate that knowledge to other industries and other blockchains as well. That's how I learned it. I mean, I started like many others. Most others started with Bitcoin and understanding how the Bitcoin technology works, and that's why I like to explain it like that as well. So, but before we can even start about talking about Bitcoin, I need to tell you a little bit of a story about money in general. You'll see my slides are not that complicated. I don't put a lot of text in the slides because I like people listening to me rather than reading. So because it's just I'm not very much of a graphic designer, as you'll see. So so excuse me on that, but you're welcome to take screenshots or notes as we go along. So the story about money, many of you might know this, but there's something that I'm going to leave out in this story, something very important. So as I tell it, see if you can realize what I'm leaving out, and then we're going to launch a poll a little bit later on, and you guys are going to have to answer the questions and see, and then we'll see how many of you got it right of what I left out. So when humans first started reigning this earth, they started transacting with each other. I mean, transactions and trading is as old as the human itself. Some scientists even argue that people started transacting and trading with each other before they even spoke. There's proof of transactions and balance sheets before there's even proof of language. So how it worked in those days is via barter. So if I was a chicken farmer or a shoemaker, let's say I was a shoemaker and my neighbor was a chicken farmer and I wanted some eggs for breakfast tomorrow, what I would have to do is I would have to take my shoes and go and trade it for some eggs. And if I wanted some bacon, I had to trade it for a pig with some pig farmer. But there were many problems with that, because what if my neighbor already had a pair of shoes and he doesn't want a new one? Or what if I just wanted 2 eggs? A pair of shoes is worth at least, I don't know, what, 100 or 200 eggs. But I don't need all of those eggs. They're just going to rot in my fridge. So I just want 2 eggs. So what am I going to do now? I only have shoes. I'm a shoemaker. So what I need to do then is I need to trade my shoes for something that's more perishable, something that won't go bad, and it's easier to scale, and then take that and go trade it for eggs, maybe rice or something like that, or some stones or glass beads or something like that. So it took a lot of a trader's time to try and scale this value, because it was really difficult to trade using barter and to scale that. So it naturally kind of evolved to commodity trading. So we used gold and silver, these kind of commodities, to trade. And it was much easier to scale. There was a massive economic boom because trading just became so much easier when we used real commodities. there was a lot of commodities that failed. Things like rice, as I mentioned, or shells and glass beads. And those commodities wasn't really scarce. It was easier to manufacture. So they didn't work. But gold and silver kind of stayed with us for all these years because it's truly scarce. Then these gold and silver were kept in vaults, and I'll get back to these vaults now. But these vaults, would give you a deposit slip, and then it kind of naturally evolved to banks. And these deposit slips would allow you to go and trade your gold back. So if you had some gold and you wanted to keep it safe, you would take it to one of these vaults for safekeeping, for custodianship, and they would give you deposit slips. And people naturally started trading with these deposit slips because anyone could just take them to the vault or the bank in this case and get the gold. So they knew they had some sort of value. And these deposit slips then became paper money as we know it today. Gold, coins and paper notes. And anyone could take these paper notes and these coins back to a bank and get the gold that they were keeping safe. Now today we use very little paper money. Most of our money today is digital. All right, so if I go to a shop and I swipe my credit card, there's no actual money being exchanging hands. So today all of our money is digital, whether it's credit card or online banking or anything like that. So this, very short, is how money evolved to where we are today. If you want to know more, I can really recommend a book called The Bitcoin Standard, which is written by Dr. Safety Namus, which is an Austrian economist. I'll maybe type it out somewhere so that you can remember it. And then, because it really goes into detail about the story and where we're coming from and where we are going. So the next step in this financial evolution, you can probably guess it, is network money. Is money for the internet. It is an economic layer on top of the internet, cryptocurrency. Now, you might not believe me now when I say that, so I'm not going to talk about that too much now, why that is the next step in the evolution, but we'll get to that a little bit later. Okay, now, if we go back in history in this story, there is something very important that I left out. Now, I want to ask you guys to think about that. I just want to see if there's a poll. Okay, the poll is not online yet. But while we wait for the poll, I'm gonna launch a poll as well where you can answer this question. But think about it quickly for a while. What did I leave out? What changed? And I'll tell you where the change happened. It changed from the IOU, from the paper money. Let me get my highlighter here, then I can. From there to there. So something changed when we went from paper money to digital money. In that step there, something significantly happened. Now, I want you to think about it for a while. Now, maybe you can type out what you think was the big change, and then we can talk about it. There. What happened there? Something happened there. Let me see if there's anyone answering me.
Carl, you can use a poll in the drop down.
Thank you, Barbara. Okay, I see security. Thanks, Jonathan. I'm going to launch a poll, and then you guys can answer on there as well. All right. You should be seeing the poll now. So the four options that I mentioned, there is paper money has no reserve backing. There is now an intermediary in every transaction. That's the second option. it has become easier to hack and steal money since it is digital now. That's the third option. Do you think that's the biggest change? Or the fourth one, onboarding to a formal financial system has become cumbersome. You know, it's much more difficult to become part of the formal financial system when we switch to digital forms of money. I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to answer these questions, to answer this poll. Some of the answers, you know, there's not just one right answer. There's just a most correct answer. Let me put it that way. So all of the answers are probably correct in some form, but there's one answer that is significantly more correct than the others. Thanks, Helen Brown. You said internet. Okay, about 70% of you guys voted already. So I think I'm going to close the poll now. I'll give you another 5 seconds for anyone that wants to answer. Okay, I'm closing the poll and I'm going to share the results with you guys. See how this works. There you go. So 60% said there is now an intermediary in every transaction. 4% says, let's start from the top. 4% says paper money has no reserve backing. That is absolutely true. Since 1971, there is no gold standard. And in the next slide, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. 60% or 58% said there's now an intermediary in every transaction. And well done, guys. That is the answer that I was looking for. 70% says it has become easier to hack and steal money since it is digital. You know, we can argue about that one. I mean, it's also easy to steal paper money and gold coins. I think it's actually more difficult to keep those safe. But we have seen major hacks as well on digital money, and onboarding to a formal banking system has become much more cumbersome. Yes, that is also very true. In fact, the World Bank releases an annual report called the World Remittance Report, in which they state that the amount of bank accounts in this world are going down, contrary to popular belief. You know, it's actually quite ridiculous if you think about it, that we live in this digital age and there are less bank accounts this year than there were last year. And that is mostly because of the extremely difficult barriers to entry for onboarding a digital system, and mostly it has to do with identity, KYC and AML laws. And we'll talk a little bit about that today as well. But the thing that I wanted to focus on, the thing that the main point that I want to make in this, and the correct answer, is the fact that you now have an intermediary in our banking system, in our means of transacting, which we never had. So if you go back in history, let me just get my highlighter, my spotlight. If you go back in history, you will notice that every single time, from the days of barter, and when we used commodities, and when we used paper money, there were only two people involved in a transaction. Never ever was it necessary for us to involve a third party or an intermediary in our transactions. But when we transact digitally, well, that all changes. And that is what we're going to talk about for the next 15 minutes or so, is why do we need that change? Now, the reason is it has to do with trust. And I'm going to talk about trust quite a lot today. You see, there are many different ways of explaining this technology. And believe me, I've experimented with all of those ways. I'm talking about blockchain technology now. And the angle that I'll be using today is to focus on trust. It is not the most abstract of concepts, this trust, but I found that if you realize how much trust we need to interact with each other in our daily lives, then you will quickly realize the amazing abilities of this technology. you will probably instantly understand what it's all about, and you'll be reminded of it every day as you go on with your daily lives. And the most important thing of it all is if you understand this concept of trust and why a blockchain provides trust, then you will be able to tell whether any blockchain solution is a good one or a bad one by simply answering a couple questions. So first of all, you can ask yourself how much trust is required to solve a particular problem, if there is any trust required, and what is the trust model that a blockchain brings, that a blockchain solution brings to the table, and how robust or how fragile is this trust. So really try to cement this idea of trust in your brain for the next 30 minutes, because if you understand it, then all of the other concepts will be clear as daylight to you. So why do I say we need trust when transacting with digital money? What does this trust actually mean? Well, to explain that, let's look at how banking works today. So, like I said, when we used to trade with commodities, banks kind of naturally came into existence as a means to safeguard commodities or money at that time. So if you were a very wealthy man and you had a lot of gold, then you needed a place to store it. Before people started trading with gold and commodities, it was actually very difficult to accumulate a lot of wealth. If you think about it, when we as humans used barter as a means of exchange, and you were a very rich guy, you needed a lot of space as well. I mean, to keep all your money, so to say. I mean, if you were a sheep farmer, needed a whole, I mean, the more money you accumulated, the more space you needed to keep all your sheep. And then something might happen, you know, some kind of disease might hit you, and you'll lose a lot of your wealth because all of your sheep might die. Now, so it was actually very difficult to become really wealthy. If you look at biblical times and so on, it was only the kings and politicians, you know, that might have been very wealthy, and the rest, it was very difficult for the average human being to accumulate that kind of wealth because they didn't have the space. Now that changed when we started trading with commodities, because now you could accumulate a lot of wealth and you didn't need all that space, but now you obviously had the risk of keeping all these commodities. So banks naturally became part of the society. It was people with a big vault that built a safe vault, and they kept the custodianship of these gold, and they would give you a deposit slip, as I said, and you will take this deposit slip and trade with that. So instead of taking a physical piece of gold to buy a bread, you might just take a deposit slip saying that I have a gram of gold or whatever, and you would use that to buy your daily food and your goods and services. Now that changed. So in the 1930s, I'm not sure when was the First World War. In any case, when the First World War happened, then the governments needed money. They needed money to build weapons to protect their citizens to go to war, and they obviously went to the banks, and they took ownership of these banks, because the banks, or the vaults in that case still, had all the money, or had all the gold. So they went, and they didn't really want the gold, they just wanted the deposit slips, so that they can use these deposit slips to buy and manufacture weapons. Now, that is when we saw the first break from the gold standard. So at that time, or before World War I, all of the deposit slips that were floating around and people trading with it, anyone could take that deposit slip and go and trade, go and get the gold from the vault. But obviously, when the governments took this over, they needed more money, they needed more liquidity to manufacture weapons, and that is when they printed more deposit slips than where there was actually gold in the vault. So that was the first break in the gold standard. After the World War I, they went back to the gold standard, And that's when the Great Depression hits, because they took liquidity out of the system to get back to the gold standard to ensure that the amount of deposit slips floating around in the economy actually matched the amount of gold in the safes or in the vaults. Then World War II broke out, and the same thing happened. Banks needed, or governments needed liquidity. They broke away from the gold standard, but then they never returned to the gold standard, except for one central bank, and that is the Federal Reserve Bank of America. They returned to the gold standard. It's the only one in the world that did, and that's why the US dollar then kind of naturally became the world's reserve currency, because other central banks in the world, instead of keeping gold in their safes, they just kept US dollars, because it was easier. They knew that the US dollar was backed by gold, and it was the same as keeping physical gold. So the US dollar naturally became the world reserve currency until 1971, when the president of America at that time, Nixon, announced that they would also break away from the gold standard, meaning that they would print more money and more deposit slips. We're talking about paper money now, which used to be backed by gold. They would print more of that than there was actual gold in the system. So they were the last central bank in the world to actually leave the gold standard. Now, so today, no fiat money, no paper money is backed by gold, and the result of that is there's lots of things that happen because of that, and interest rates are not market driven anymore, and so is inflation and so on. So, but we're not going to go into that. That's a long story, very interesting story, by the way, and go read up about it if you're interested. Like I said, I see Alison posted the book there of the Bitcoin Standard. Very interesting book. I'm basically condensing 9 chapters here into 10 minutes. But banks today does not. So whereas banks kept gold and they provided the service of keeping gold safe, today they provide the service of keeping data safe. So instead of having vaults or safes where gold is kept, today banks keep data centers. They have massive data centers in which they just simply update ledgers, and their job is to keep that safe. Now, how did the trust model change from when banks kept gold to where banks are keeping, to where we are now? Think about this for a while. You can answer me in the chat box if you want to. Thank you, Chris. I see you said World War I was 1914 to 1918, and World War II, thanks, Martin, 1939 to 1945. Thanks, guys. So, why is the bank now essential when we deal with electronic money? And why was it not so essential when we dealt with commodities? Think about it. You can answer if you want to, otherwise just think and see if you can spot the difference. So, the reason is that when we used gold or barter or paper money or gold deposit slips or any of those, we had the option of trading and transacting in a peer-to-peer manner. So think about it this way. If someone comes into my shop, let's say I sell bread, and someone comes into my shop and they want to buy a bread. They can give me 20 Rand. Let's say that bread is 20 Rand. They can give me 20 Rand in cash, or they can, if we use barter, I don't know, they can give me a packet of rice or whatever, and we can trade the bread. We can transact with each other. I can give the bread to my client, and my client will give me the 20 Rand. And who are involved in that transaction? Only 2 people. Myself and the buyer of that bread. No one else. I can take that 20 Rand note, I can look at it, I can see that it is fake, or I mean not fake, I can see that it is a genuine 20 Rand note, I can take it and I can buy a liter of petrol with that. If he brings me a packet of rice, I can look at the rice, I can see, well, yeah, this rice is worth 20 Rand, or a pair of shoes or whatever, and I can give him the bread and we can part our ways. I don't need to trust that guy. I don't care who that guy is, whether he's a criminal or not. In fact, I'll go so far as to say that even if I know that that 20 Rand that he gave me is a fake note, I will still accept it as long as I have the confidence that I'll be able to take that 20 Rand note and go buy a liter of petrol next door with it. If I think that the garage owner will not notice that the 20 Rand note is fake, I'll take it. Why not? Now let's say we transact digitally. What changes now? Let's say the person comes and he transacts and he buys something from my shop, this bread, digitally. He comes and he swipes his credit card. What happens now? Well, now I need to trust this guy. Because what if this buyer has his credit card hacked and he just made it look like he paid me 20 Rand, but in actual fact he only paid me 10 Rand, or he didn't pay me at all. And he needs to trust me, because what if I hacked my machine and I made it look like I took 20 Rand, but actually I took 100 Rand, you know? That is perfectly possible. So suddenly we need to trust each other. We cannot buy from each other. We cannot transact digitally without trusting each other. Now, of course, we know that humans cannot trust each other. Humans are dishonest by nature. So we need a third party. And what we do is then this bank that is that keeps the data center safe, they come in as a third party, as a trusted intermediary. We basically outsource this trust to them. And we both say, well, we both trust the bank, so let us keep the bank in the middle, and we trust that the bank will deduct 20 Rand from your account and add it to my account in exchange for this bread. You see why it is impossible to now trade without a trusted intermediary. So whereas the bank used to be an independent third party, they are now, in fact, a trusted intermediary, someone that we cannot exchange or transact without. And the reason why we cannot do that, I'll get back to the slide now, is let's say someone comes to my shop and they say, well, you know, I want to pay you digitally, but I don't want to use a bank. So I have this picture of my cat. You can see there, and he shows me on his cell phone. You see this picture of my cat. So it's a very nice picture. It's a very cute cat. So, you know, this picture is worth at least $10. I mean, it's a beautiful picture. High resolution. And so in exchange for the bread, I'll just email you 2 pictures of my cat. 2 of the same pictures. I mean, that's $20. So, and then I can take the bread. Now you see what the problem with this is. Because if he emails me 2 pictures, well, then I have a copy of the picture. I have 2 copies, and I can just make as many copies as I want. I can make 1,000 copies or 1,000,000 copies within a few seconds, and then suddenly I am a millionaire. I just Control-C and Control-V, copy and paste 1,000,000 pictures on my hard drive, and then suddenly I am an instant millionaire. It's like I won the lotto because of this picture of the cat. So you see why digital money without a trusted third party cannot work. The reason for that is that digital data in itself is not scarce. It's very, very easy to copy. And scarcity is one of the attributes that we need for money. So going back to the previous slides, this is called the double spending problem. So me being able to take the same picture and spend it twice, or 3 times, or 10 times, or 1,000,000 times is called the double spending problem. And that is why digital transacting without a trusted third party never worked, because digital data is so easy to copy. So how that problem was solved by banks is they would be a trusted intermediary, they would keep a ledger, and if someone comes and swipes their credit card or pays me in any form of digital manner, whether there is an EFT or a credit card or any other means, then the bank would update their ledger and they would deduct money from the buyer's account and add it to the seller's account. Now, what if there are 2 banks involved in this transaction? What if the buyer banks with Standard Bank and I bank with ABSA? What happens then? Well, both of these banks need to update their ledger, but obviously they don't trust each other, because They are competing entities. We might trust the banks, but the banks don't trust each other. So what happens? Well, they need to outsource their trust to a third party, just like we outsource our trust to a third party. And that third party that the banks outsource to is called the central bank. Now, what happens if one central bank pays another central bank? Exactly the same thing. They outsource it to a third party called the Central Bank of Central Banks, the Bank of International Central Settlements. You see, this is actually quite ridiculous. It's quite a cumbersome process, but this is how payments work. I mean, of course, that is not the central bank's only job. They have lots of things that they do. I mean, they have to tell us that inflation is between 3 and 6% within target. They have to suck a target out of their thumb. So they have to do lots of things. They do not only provide trust to commercial banks, but that is one of their many jobs. All right. So as I said, we cannot use digital transacting without a third party because digital data is not scarce. It is too easy to copy. And data has no inherent value as well. I mean, if you think about it, you can work your entire life writing a thesis, maybe a master's or a PhD degree or whatever. And, you know, it can take you years and years of time to write this thesis and do lots of research. And then you send that report to someone and you think that that report has a lot of value, and then that person just goes and makes 1,000 copies of it. You see that digital data, even though the information inside it might be valuable, the data itself, the file, is worthless because it is too easy to copy. Now, a bank obviously solves the double spend problem by keeping a ledger, a centralized ledger, and they basically act as a clearinghouse. So the bank needs to be in the middle, and they need to. A clearinghouse basically means it's a trusted party that makes sure that the ledger is accurately updated. Now, I'm going to go back to this concept of trust because this is the main concept that I need you to understand. I need you to understand that a bank's main job is to provide trust. They do very, very little other than providing trust. Okay, when they kept gold in a safe or in a vault, they had quite a lot of work to do. I mean, it was not easy to get that physical security and maintain that physical security. So, you know, there was a lot of labor involved in that. Today, banks require very, very little labor for what they do. I mean, updating a ledger is as simple and labor-free as sending an automated email. But they are now. But the difference is that we do not have a choice now whether we want to make use of them or not. Every transaction that we do, we require a bank in between. So they only provide trust. But what do they charge for? What are their fees? Well, their fees is basically still the same as it were when they provided us with all that labor to keep the gold safe. So, and that trust that they provide is quite expensive. And it's not only banks, it's any third-party intermediary that provides us with trust. I mean, if you look at this bill that I put onto the slideshow here, you'll see that this is actually a bill that I received from a lawyer a couple of years ago. This was in 2015 already, so it's about 4 years ago, when I was involved in a property transfer. This was a property that I bought back in 2015, and when I received this bill, you know, I was quite blown away, seeing that the lawyer was able to charge me 40 Rand for every email that they sent. And this email that they sent did not require, you know, it wasn't really, the information in there was definitely not worth 40 Rand. So why are they able to charge me 40 Rand for every email that they send? Well, it is because of the trust that they provide. They are a trusted intermediary. Just like the banks, these lawyers sit in the middle of a property transfer, and their job, just like the banks, is one thing. They need to make sure that the property is removed from the buyer's name and registered in this, removed from the seller's name and registered in the buyer's name. And they sit in the middle of this, and that is all they do. Think about this for a while. What other service does a intermediary like this, like a transfer lawyer, provide other than trust? The templates that they use, the contracts or whatever, you can probably download that from Google. Okay, I'm probably oversimplifying. They do some things like dispute resolution and whatnot. But their main product, their main service that they provide is trust. How much does it cost them to generate this trust? Nothing. So what are the profit margins on this trust? It's infinite. Think about it for a while. It's not something that's clear when you first hear about it, this concept of trust. But I'm sure if you take this concept and you think about it, and you think about where trust is provided and where you make use of trust in your daily interactions every day, in your job or wherever you go, then you will, by tomorrow, you will really understand how significant this is in our daily lives. Think about your own industry as well. I mean, tomorrow we're going to make this technology real, and then we're going to apply it to real life situations. And every use case that we're going to talk about tomorrow, you'll realize that it all has to do with trust, because a blockchain is all about trust. And anything that we do in our daily lives that requires trust can usually be replaced with a blockchain. And if you are one of those trusted intermediaries, whether you're a business owner or an employee, or whether you are an industry as a whole, you need to be aware of this technology and know how to apply it so that you can not only survive, but actually flourish in a way where trust is provided by software. Okay, so let's quickly talk about trust. Let's see if you guys can understand what trust is, and then after this we will dig into Bitcoin and see how the Bitcoin blockchain actually replaces the trust that we use in our daily lives, or that we pay for. So, who do you trust when doing an EFT? If you guys don't mind, send me a couple answers on the chat box, in the questions box, and then I'm going to read it out, and then we're going to talk about it. If you already understand the concept of trust and you think that you you know what it's all about, then please answer it. Let's teach the others as well what trust is all about, and then we can all take it from there. It is very important for me that you all understand this concept, okay? Because if you understand this, like I said, the other things will fall into place very easily. So, first question, who do you trust when you do an EFT, an electronic fund transfer? If you transfer money from one person to the other, who are the trusted third parties there? The bank. Thanks, Muzi. Yes, you do trust the bank. The bank is obviously in the middle. That's what we talked about all this time. You trust that the bank will update their ledger accurately, that they will make no mistakes, that they will not be fraudulent, and all those kind of things. Who do you trust when you send a meme via WhatsApp? How is this trust charged for? What happens when the trust is broken? How fragile is this trust? How easily is that trust broken? And then the last one, the receiving bank and the originating bank. Thanks, Rindani. The WhatsApp company, Martin, you are correct. Which is Facebook. You trust them. You trust them that they will keep your data safe, right? That they will not sell your data, that they will not leak it to some party or some person that you don't want them to leak it to, and that they will be a secure service. How is this trust charged for in this case? Because, I mean, no trust is free. No trust, except for blockchain trust, but we'll get to that. But no other trust that we have ever used in our lives are free. Trust is always charged for. I mean, I just showed you the bill from that lawyer. I mean, it's charged for it. They charge a hell of a lot of money for that. The payment switch, the bank, and Facebook. Thanks, Shishan, you are correct. Just want to see if I can make my question box a little bit bigger. Yes. All right. And then the last question. There's a little bit of a trick in this one. Who do you trust when you buy something at Woolworths with cash? Remember I talked to you about cash transaction. If someone comes to my shop with 20 Rand and they buy a bread, I said it's a peer-to-peer transaction because only me and the other person involved in that transaction. But I actually gave away the answer there in the slide, but there is a little bit of trust involved in that. What is that trust? The answer is there, but maybe you guys will have a little bit more. Okay, so a couple of people said you trust Woolworths. I would actually not agree with that, because if you buy something at Woolworths with cash, you do not need to trust Woolworths with anything. I mean, whatever you're buying, let's say you buy a pair of shorts or some clothes, then, I mean, you can look at that clothes because it's a physical item. You can look at it and you can see that that clothes is of decent quality, that it's worth at least as much as you paid for it. So you don't need to trust Woolworths with anything because you can verify for yourself. Because it's a physical item, you don't need to trust them. Yes, Derek, you are correct. The only trust involved in a transaction with Woolworths is that of the South African Reserve Bank, actually. Helen said the Woolworths approved supplier. Well, it depends on what you are looking for. I mean, if the quality of the clothes is not the only thing you're looking for, and Woolworths tells you that it comes from some other supplier that you want, then obviously that trust is going to be there. Yes, you are correct, Helen. But let's assume now that you are only there for the quality of the clothes, and that is something that you can verify yourself. All right, back to who was it? Let's say that Derek's answer said that they need to trust the South African Reserve Bank. Why do you need to trust the South African Reserve Bank when you do a cash transaction? It all has to do with monetary policy. So you do not know, well, you are not 100% sure. You cannot verify that whatever you are paying for that item that you are buying at Woolworths, that money will still be valued the same tomorrow. So let's say you bought something of 100 Rand. You bought a shirt from Woolworths for 100 Rand. Then the South African Reserve Bank theoretically has the ability to change the value of that 100 Rand tomorrow. So they can print a whole lot more money overnight. And what will happen then is that 100 Rand will not be worth 100 Rand tomorrow. Now, that has not really happened to a great extent in South Africa, ever happened to a great extent in South Africa, but it has happened in our neighboring country, Zimbabwe. When at one point, in the morning, 100 Zim dollars might be worth 100 Zim dollars, and in the afternoon, that 100 Zim dollars might be worth 10 Zim dollars. So, which means that the shop, the Woolworths in this case, would lose out quite a lot because they would keep that cash, and then that cash would be worthless in a couple of hours even, or at least the next day. Now, it can go the other way around as well, although we never see that. But the South African Reserve Bank can retract liquidity, which means that 100 Rand will be worth a lot more tomorrow, which means if I was the buyer, then I would lose out. But I would argue that trust is very robust. I mean, like I said, it's never happened in South Africa. What are the chances that would happen tomorrow? Very, very little. So the amount of trust that you require when you buy something at Woolworths with cash is a lot less, significantly less than the amount of trust that you require when you do an electronic fund transfer, that you do an electronic transaction. Surely that also applies to digital money, Ellen? You're correct. Thank you. I'm so glad you see that. There's also an amount of trust in the South African Reserve Bank in their monetary policy when you do an electronic transfer. But I would argue that that trust that you require, that you place in the South African Reserve Bank is negligible compared to the amount of trust that you place with the retail bank when you do that transaction, because it is so much less. So actually, I would say that when you trust, that when you buy something at Woolworths with cash, there is no trust involved at all. I mean, there's this little bit with the South African Reserve Bank, but that's actually just that was a trick question. But I want you to see that that the amount of trust required when you buy something with cash is a lot less compared to the amount of trust when you buy something with an EFT. It is the amount of trust that you require when you buy something with cash is actually so little that you only need two parties, and that is the buyer and the seller. You do not need an independent, an intermediary to which you can outsource. You need to outsource that trust to for that transaction to happen. That transaction can be completed in a peer-to-peer manner. I hope you guys all understand this concept. I've talked about it quite a lot, and you probably wonder now, what the hell does this have to do with blockchain? I came here for blockchain training, and now this guy only talks about trust. But as I said, I wanted to spend a lot of time on this, and I spent a whole hour on it. And the reason is that some people manage to understand blockchain technology without even thinking about trust. But I do not think that they understand blockchain technology and the abilities that blockchain brings if they do not understand this concept of trust in a very, very deep way. So that's why I spent a lot of time on it. But we're going to move on now, and then we're going to talk about a little bit about blockchain. Just one thing that I need to still touch on before we go to Bitcoin is the characteristics of money. So as we talked about, as we said, if someone comes into my shop and he wants to buy something digitally without a bank, and he says he's going to send me 2 pictures of his cat for the bread, then I can measure those pictures of the cat according to these characteristics, and then we can decide whether that picture of the cat can actually work as money or not. Is it a medium of exchange? Is it a unit of account? Is it fungible, divisible, durable, and a store of value? Now, most of these concepts are actually self-explanatory. If it's a medium of exchange, it means that someone else must be able to accept it as money. Unit of account, so do I actually measure my bread in terms of pictures of cats, or do I measure it in rands or dollars? Fungible has a nice little story to it, which I'll get to. It needs to be divisible. Can I divide the picture of the cat into 100 pieces or not? I doubt you can. So we can already see that pictures of cats cannot work as money. It needs to be durable. A picture of a cat's quite durable, except if you lose your hard drive. But I mean, we have the cloud, so picture of a cat is durable. Is it a store of value? No, it's not a store of value because it is not scarce. Store of value goes hand to hand with scarcity, and something needs to be scarce, and digital data is definitely not scarce. Now, what if we use a blockchain? Satoshi Nakamoto, the creator of Bitcoin, managed with a few technologies available at the time to create scarcity in digital data, and this is where Bitcoin comes in. So let's say that person that bought the bread from me, let's say he comes into my shop and he says, well, I'm going to send you these pictures of this cat and I'm going to pay you with these. But we're going to be making use of a blockchain protocol, something similar to Bitcoin. What he can do then, what happens then is, or what is possible then, is that he can send me those pictures of the cat, and it would then be undisputed that he is not the owner of that picture anymore, and that I am now the owner of that picture. So suddenly, you created scarcity in digital data, because that buyer of the bread cannot go down to the next shop now and respend that picture of the cat anymore. So if you can create scarcity in digital data, then suddenly you can achieve all of these. Just get my highlighter. You can achieve all of these characteristics of money. In fact, you can write a software program that achieves all of them, and you can actually write software programs that achieve some of these characteristics and not others, so that it becomes kind of a niche type of money. And maybe that's what Bitcoin is. Bitcoin is not an excellent medium of exchange. It's definitely not a unit of account yet. It is not so fungible. It is very divisible, durable, but it's an excellent store of value, theoretically at least, from the supply and demand side. Now, so, you know, whereas economists around the world believe that money needs to adhere to all of these characteristics before it can be called money, that assumption is now challenged, because now we can create money. Now that we can create software that defines money, we can create money that is an excellent store of value, but maybe a terrible medium of exchange. Or we can create money that's the other way around. It's maybe an excellent medium of exchange. It's not fungible, but it is a terrible store of value, something like that. So that assumption is now severely challenged. Now, what is a medium? What is fungibility? Well, fungibility has a nice story attached to it. So fungibility basically means that one unit of account, one unit of money should be exactly the same as another unit of money. So if I have 200 Rand notes, you should not be able to tell me that you will rather want one than the other. Every 100 Rand note should be worth 100 Rand, and you should be 10 times as worth as a 10 Rand note, and not 11 times or 9 times as much as a 10 Rand note. Now, the story behind that goes back all the way to 1781, I think, in the Royal Bank of Scotland. This bank was robbed in 1971, and what the central bank of that time of Scotland did was they said, well, all of the banknotes that was robbed from this bank are removed from circulation. So you are not allowed to keep any money that that was robbed, because they knew the serial numbers of the money, of the banknotes that were robbed. And what happened then is, as this money started circulating in the economy, people obviously checked and measured their money to the database of stolen money, and if they noticed that they had a stolen dollar bill or a stolen euro bill or pound or whatever, no, euro, then they would probably obviously try to get rid of it as fast as possible. So it was a scramble, because by law you had to take that stolen euro bill back to the central bank, and you will not be compensated for it because it was obviously stolen. So naturally, these bills were not worth as much as they were supposed to. If you had a 10 euro bill, maybe, and it was a stolen one, maybe it was worth 8 euros. As people tried to get rid of them as quickly as possible. Obviously, no one took them to the central bank, because then you would lose out. So this was a landmark case that said that if money is stolen, then it should be circulated in the economy. You cannot ban that money from being circulated, because it creates chaos in people trying to get rid of that money. So that is what fungibility means. It means that all units of account, all bills should be the same as another bill. That is why apples are bad money, because you get good apples and bad apples. That is, art is not fungible at all, because I'm not an artist. You would not pay the same amount of money for my art than for Picasso's art, obviously. That is what fungibility means. Now, is our money fungible? Is our money that we use, do that confirm to all of these characteristics? Well, I would say that fiat money in general is very mediocre money. I mean, if you have a $100 bill that has a little tear in it, and you try to go to Africa and you try to spend that, or any third world country, in fact, you'll quickly realize that it's not so fungible. merchants don't want money that's that has a tear in it. They want nice, crisp, and clean money. So a $100 bill that's been used a lot might only be worth $90. It's also not such a. It's also not so divisible. If you take the same example, people usually want, in third world countries, they want smaller denominations. They want $1 notes, $5 notes. They don't want $100 notes because change is scarce. It's a terrible store of value in some countries. Look at Zimbabwe, Venezuela, Greece. So I would say that in general, our money that we use today is very mediocre in all of these. Enter Bitcoin. Let's talk about Bitcoin. Bitcoin was created in October 2008. Actually, in the months preceding October 2008, by a pseudonym called Satoshi Nakamoto. Now, we do not know who Satoshi Nakamoto is, whether it's a man or a woman or a group of people, although I do think that Satoshi Nakamoto is probably a man because he still has 1 million unspent Bitcoins. That is just a joke. We do not know who Satoshi Nakamoto is. You see, I wish I could actually see you guys laugh. I mean, that would be really nice. But I assume you guys are laughing. So, Satoshi Nakamoto was part of this mailing list called the Cypherpunks, which was a bunch of nerds exchanging cryptographic ideas to each other. It's just a mailing list. And he circulated this white paper, which is like a document describing this idea that he has to this mailing list back in October 2008. And this white paper described a form of digital peer-to-peer cash or digital peer-to-peer money, which would be the first of its kind. I mean, if you think about it, it's actually impossible. Okay, ignore Bitcoin, ignore what we've had for the last 10 years now. Think about digital data. Think about trying to send someone something of value digitally. Just like I explained earlier, it's impossible. All right. So so everyone thought it was impossible until Satoshi Nakamoto said, "But hang on. If I use a few technologies which were available at the time, some clever cryptography called hashing and private-public key pairs." And we use proof of work, which was developed by a guy called Adam back in the 90s. Then if we combine all of these technologies in a certain way, then we can create scarcity in digital data, like I said. And when we do that, we can write software programs and we can write monetary policies for this scarce digital data. And we can actually have money that we do not require a trusted intermediary for. So he described that in October 2008. Then a couple guys came together and they built the software and to actually implement this idea of Satoshi Nakamoto. And on the 3rd of January 2009, so only 3 months later, the first block was mined, the first Bitcoin block by Satoshi Nakamoto. And then at that time, there were about 3 or 4 guys now chatting to Satoshi Nakamoto on this on this mailing list, and they were quite interested in this idea. They helped Satoshi Nakamoto to test out this software, and the first transaction happened 9 days later when Satoshi Nakamoto sent 10 Bitcoin to a guy called Hal Finney, who unfortunately passed away a few years later. And it took, how many months is that? From the 12th of January to the 21st of May 2010 for Bitcoin to actually become a medium of exchange. And that, okay, so that is quite a nice story to it. I'm going to tell you guys the story now of when it became a medium of exchange. So this was the white paper. Go read it if you want to. It's quite interesting. It's available all over the place. You can read that. And this is the Bitcoin Genesis block. This was the first block that was mined on the 3rd of January 2009 by Satoshi Nakamoto. And check what Satoshi Nakamoto did here. He actually put in some information in this block there. You can see there, the Times, 3 January 2009. Chancellor on brink of second bailout for banks. Now, if you go and check out the London Times of the 3rd of January 2008, you will see that on the front page, there's an article titled Chancellor on brink of second bailout for banks. Now, the reason Satoshi Nakamoto did that was twofold. First of all, he embedded that message into that block as a bit of a tongue-in-the-cheek way to say that, you know, we found an alternative banking system where we do not need to rely on taxpayers and the middle class to bail out corporates. And that's a discussion on its own. It's a whole different discussion. But the other reason, the second reason for Satoshi Nakamoto putting this message in there was to show that, you know, this was indeed when the first block was mined. Satoshi Nakamoto could not have created the first block and did something sinister with this blockchain before the 3rd of January 2009, as obviously he did not have access to the newspaper at that time. So, as I said, on the 21st of January 2009, Bitcoin became a medium of exchange. This is one of the funniest stories in Bitcoin. So this was a forum discussion. By that time, there was quite a lot of people, a few hundred people that's been interested in this technology and has started mining Bitcoin and has started using it and joining in the discussions. So there was a forum that was created called BitcoinTalk.org at the time, and all these weirdos that were interested in internet money chatted to each other because it was very technical, not at all user-friendly at the time. And this guy called Laszlo, he actually asked, you know, I wonder if this Bitcoin thing can work as a medium of exchange. I want to try it. I mean, it's all cool and so on, but no one's actually ever bought something with Bitcoin. So he posted this message on there. I'm not going to read through the entire message, but he said that I would like to buy 2 pizzas. I want large pizzas. You know, I like onions, peppers, whatever on my pizza. Anyone who wants to sell me 2 pizzas, I'll give you 10,000 Bitcoin for it. Because at the time, Bitcoin was not worth much. I think 10,000 Bitcoin, you know, there wasn't really a market for Bitcoin at the time, but it was worth about $40 maybe. So it was, I mean, 2 pizzas, $40 is quite a lot, but I mean, it's not ridiculous, perhaps. So, so he said, okay, who wants to buy it for me? And you can see that was posted on the 18th of May, 2010. And then by the 21st of May, 2010, he said, well, no one wants to buy me pizza. No one has actually replied on his forum post. Is the amount of Bitcoin I'm offering too low? And then this guy, Bitcoin FX, whoever that is, says like, hey, I'll order you a pizza, but I'm not in the USA. So just give me your address, and then I'll call some pizza place close to you, and then they will deliver your pizza. So Laszlo did that, and he gave him the address and sent him the 10,000 Bitcoin. And then he posted this nice picture of him and his 2 sons eating the pizza and saying thank you. So that happened back in 2010, and today that Bitcoin pizza is worth about $91 million. That's what he paid for the Bitcoin pizza, which is close to 2 billion rand. I know that because I follow the Bitcoin pizza account on Twitter, which reminds me every day how much the pizza is worth. So, yeah, can you believe that? Huh? 10 years. 10 years, Bitcoin grew from having no value at all to being worth $91 million for a pizza. That is quite ridiculous. So I'm sure Laszlo enjoyed his 2 billion rand pizza 10 years ago. I hope he did. All right, so I just want to quickly check. I see there's a long question here from Nell. The primary function of the SARB is controlling money supply within the economy. Can the SARB or Treasury force you to use a... Okay. Now, I'm going to hang on to that question, and I'm going to answer you a little bit later, okay? Because you are asking, what you're asking about is whether Bitcoin can be used as legal tender. Alexandra, I can't see the participant questions on my control panel. I'm not sure, maybe one of the moderators, I'm not sure if that is possible for you to see the participant questions. Okay, but I'll read it for you. Basically what Nell asked is whether Bitcoin is legal tender or not, and whether it can be legal tender. So I'm gonna get back to that question once we finished up with Bitcoin, with the Bitcoin discussion, once you understand Bitcoin. So what is Bitcoin? It's simply a protocol. Bitcoin is nothing else than a protocol. What is a protocol? A protocol is a set of rules. It's a set of rules within software. The World Wide Web is a protocol. HTTP is a protocol. It basically means that if you stick to a certain set of rules, you can play along, and if you don't, you cannot play along. So think about it this way. As HTTP is a protocol, and the World Wide Web is a protocol, you can create a website, you can program a website, and if you stick to that protocol, any browser can read your website and display it to other users. If you do not stick to that protocol, your website will still be a website, but no one will be able to read it, no one will be able to see it. So the World Wide Web is simply a set of rules that you stick to. I don't know exactly what those rules are. Maybe it can be something like, you know, the programming language that you use, and if you say that, and the text, the type of text that you use, maybe the font, you know, that can be type of the rules. And if you use a different kind of font, then browsers would not understand your website. So Bitcoin is exactly that. It is a protocol. It's a set of rules that if you stick to those rules, you can be part of the ecosystem. And you can, and there's quite a lot of role players in this whole ecosystem. First of all, there are full nodes. People keeping a copy of the blockchain, and I'll get to what the blockchain is now, on their hard drives. Then there are mining nodes, people that actually mine the Bitcoin. You might have heard about mining nodes, and we need to talk about mining because there's lots of scams as well. Then there are users, you and me, that use Bitcoin. You might not be a user yet, but I'm going to send you guys some Bitcoin a bit later. And then you will become a user. Then there are exchanges, places where you can buy and sell Bitcoin. There are thought leaders, people that, there are developers. Obviously, they need to be developers. So there's a whole ecosystem, and everyone needs to stick to the rules for it to be Bitcoin. If you decide not to stick to the rules, then you will not be using Bitcoin. So that is basically what Bitcoin is, and it solves the double spending problem through an incentive structure. Okay, I'll get back to that. It enables an economic layer on top of the internet. So it enables us, obviously, as I said, to create scarcity in digital data. And by that scarcity in digital data, we create money, and we can send and receive that money to each other via the internet. There will only be ever 21 million Bitcoin. That is the monetary policy of Bitcoin. The nice thing about this is, and the weird thing is, that we know the monetary policy of Bitcoin for the next 120 years. We know that there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin. We know how much Bitcoin will be minted every single day, every single second of the time for the next 120 years. And we know that there's currently 21 million Bitcoin minted or created. So there's only 3 million more left for the next 120 years. And we know that currently, every 10 minutes, 12.5 new Bitcoins are released into the system. It has a deflationary monetary policy, which means as time goes on, fewer and fewer Bitcoin are being created. So that's basically the monetary policy of it. So how does Bitcoin work? Well, very similar to this thing that you see here. This. Very similar to this. So what you are seeing here, I can't remember exactly where this comes from. Let me check for you. What you are seeing here is a ledger, I'm going to tell you now. I actually made a note of it. It's an annual balance sheet of a state-owned farm, drawn up by the scribe responsible for artisans, which accounts for details of raw materials and work days for a basketry workshop. Now, I don't remember. Oh, yes, it was somewhere around 2000 BC when they discovered this thing, or when they used this thing. So it's a ledger. Basically, what you see here is a ledger. It's one of the first and oldest ledgers that we ever found. And that is exactly how Bitcoin works. Bitcoin is simply a ledger. So if you think back into to my story of banking and how banking used to work, or banking still works today, banking is a ledger. It's simply a ledger that contains checks and balances of people that want to buy and sell things. There's nothing physically being exchanged, and we all just trust that the bank updates their ledger accurately when transactions happen. Now, this is exactly what Bitcoin is. There's nothing physically being exchanged when you send one Bitcoin from the sender to the receiver, when one Bitcoin exchanges hands, but a ledger is updated in the background. Now, the magic thing about this is that this ledger that we update in the background is not updated by any single person or any single entity. This ledger is a decentralized distributed ledger, which means anyone, and it is permissionless, which means anyone in the world can be part of this ledger and assist in maintaining the accuracy of this. Now, this is going to blow your mind. How does this work? How do we have one master ledger, which, by the way, gets updated by about 2,000 transactions every 10 minutes, and it is 100% accurate to this day. So from the 3rd of January 2009, was Satoshi Nakamoto mined the first block, and what was it, on the 9th of January 2009, when he sent 10 Bitcoin to Hal Finney. That was the first transaction. To date, every single transaction that is on there is 100% accurate. The ledger, there is not one single mistake in that ledger. There is still only 18 million Bitcoin in circulation, so no one created new Bitcoin out of thin air. And it is completely permissionless. Anyone can join, anyone can edit this ledger, write to it, change it if they want to, but still it is accurate. How does that work? It works through an incentive structure. So let me tell you how it works. On a very, very high level, how Satoshi Nakamoto managed to do this, how he managed to keep this ledger accurate, or how the protocol works. So the protocol says that if you want to, anyone in the world can download this ledger and keep a copy of it. If you do that, and you update it, every 10 minutes you download all of the transactions that happened in the last 10 minutes, you check that they are accurate and you add them to the ledger. Anyone in the world can do it. Anyone can write to this ledger. Anyone can change anything in this ledger. I mean, it's permissionless. If you want to, you can go and give yourself some Bitcoin. But still, we know that it is 100% accurate. Now, I have a copy of this ledger on my hard drive. I run a full node. It's called running a full node. So why don't I go back to yesterday and I say, well, I'm going to give myself some Bitcoin. I'm going to add an entry to this ledger and give myself some Bitcoin. Technically, I can do that. I mean, I can go into the ledger. I know how to change things. The ledger looks like an Excel spreadsheet. So why don't I give myself some Bitcoin? Well, the protocol says that if you go back and you change, and if you want to add anything to this ledger, if you want to write to the ledger, you have to pay. It's not free. It's very expensive to write to the ledger. And if you paid enough, and everyone in the world can verify that you paid enough, then you are allowed to write to the ledger. And then the second thing that everyone checks is that whatever you wrote to the ledger is accurate. And they ask you 2 questions. And then when both of those questions are yes, then you are allowed, and that append, whatever you appended to the ledger then is accepted as the truth. So let's try to make this a little bit more abstract. Satoshi Nakamoto obviously needed to find a way to prove that someone paid. I mean, you can't make it free. So there's only one global currency in this world before Bitcoin now, and that is electricity. If you think about it, electricity is more or less the same value anywhere in the world. It's more or less available to everyone. And if you spent a certain amount of electricity and you can prove that you spent that amount of electricity, then you obviously paid. I mean, electricity is not free. So that's what Satoshi Nakamoto did, is he said, well, prove to me, or prove to the protocol that you paid, so you just wasted some electricity. And if you manage to prove that, then you are allowed to write to the ledger. And then we're going to ask whatever you write to the ledger, we're going to ask two questions. First of all, are you the rightful owner of that blockchain, of that Bitcoin? Because obviously what you're going to write to the ledger is transactions. So everyone that sent Bitcoin to someone else, were they the rightful owner of that Bitcoin? And secondly, did they not create Bitcoin out of thin air? So did they actually have the balance that they were trying to send? If both of those questions are yes, and you can prove that you spent a hell of a lot of electricity and burned some electricity, basically wasted it, then you are allowed to write to the ledger, and anyone in the whole world can confirm that. Sounds weird, right? So the way that was done is through a process called proof of work. So the proof of work means proof that you spent electricity, you actually did some work. You do that by solving a very difficult mathematical puzzle, which can almost be compared to solving a Sudoku puzzle. So if someone solves a Sudoku puzzle, it's very easy for you to verify that that Sudoku puzzle is correct, right? I mean, for those of you who don't play Sudoku, you can think of it as a crossword puzzle. It's very easy to see whether a crossword puzzle was correctly populated or not. I mean, you can just see if everything works out, and if everything adds up together, then you know that person has actually put in the thought and the work to solve that puzzle. But doing the puzzle itself is very, very difficult. I mean, it might take days to solve a very difficult Sudoku puzzle or a very difficult crossword puzzle, but verifying it's very, very easy. So you can almost look at it in the same way. The proof of work works exactly the same. So your computer needs to solve a very difficult mathematical problem, which has absolutely nothing to do with the blockchain. It's just a way to prove that you wasted electricity. Quite ridiculous, eh? So you just prove that you wasted electricity by solving this puzzle. Someone else can very quickly verify that you solved this puzzle. And if you did, then well done. You can write to the ledger. Now, I need to speed this up a little bit because I only have 1 hour left and we haven't even started talking about blockchain. We only talked about Bitcoin and trust. So this blockchain, this Bitcoin protocol actually maintains an average writing time of 10 minutes. So every 10 minutes, a new block is added to the Bitcoin blockchain. And the block is just a part of this ledger. So this entire ledger that we talked about, that contains every single Bitcoin transaction that's ever happened, is updated every 10 minutes by about 2,000 transactions. And that's the 2,000 that happened in the last 10 minutes. And anyone that can prove that they wasted electricity is allowed to write to the ledger. Now, basically, the one that wasted the most electricity is the one that has the privilege of writing to the ledger, and that person is then paid 12.5 Bitcoin. That's the incentive. So, I mean, you're not just going to waste electricity for nothing, right? You're not going to waste money just to have the privilege of writing to the ledger. So there's obviously some incentive to that as well. So if you can prove that you wasted that electricity, that you paid that money, then you get incentivized by 12.5 Bitcoin. And the protocol is written in such a way that it will almost always be marginally profitable for anyone to waste that electricity. So you'll always get a little bit more in monetary value than you paid to write to the ledger in the first place. Okay. All right. Now, this is my favorite part. I want to send one of you a little bit of Bitcoin. Because I need you to not because I I mean, this is not a Bitcoin course. We're getting to the blockchain part. I just need you to experience it, and we're gonna get back to this concept of trust now. So I'm gonna send one of you a little bit of Bitcoin, a tiny little bit amount, not a lot, something that you can use to send along to someone else again in future, so they can also experience it. And then we're gonna talk about the trust that was required when I sent that little bit of Bitcoin. So you need to reverse your thoughts a little bit again and think about the trust required when we did a banking transaction, when we did an EFT. We talked about it so much. I'm sure you guys are now well versed with this concept of trust. Now let's see how this trust model changed from when we did a banking transaction, a normal transaction, monetary transaction, to now what we're doing with Bitcoin. So I'm sure some of you has Bitcoin wallets installed. I don't want an exchange wallet. Okay, don't give me an address that you have on Luno or Altcoin Trader or any of those exchanges. Please, I want a Bitcoin address that you generated yourself. All right. Now you can do that by downloading a mobile wallet, as you can see there, from Samurai or Mycelium or Jax, or alternatively, and this is perhaps easier now for you guys that don't have any wallets, is go to bitcoinpaperwallet.com and quickly generate yourself a wallet there, and then you need to get the address to me. So you can either email it to my email address as it is there, or tweet it, and I will quickly find it and I will send you a little bit of Bitcoin. Anyone can do it. More than one can do it as well. I'm gonna do only one transaction now. But the rest of you, I'll make sure everyone gets Bitcoin. So when we are done here today, then I'll send each and everyone that sent me their address, I'll send you a little bit. It's not going to be a lot. It's maybe, I don't know, 5 Rand or so. So send me a little bit, and then I'm going to send one of you some Bitcoin so that we can experience the trust model required. Okay, I'm going to quickly check all my emails. I'm checking my emails, and I'm going to check Twitter as well, wherever I can get an address. I see I've received 1 or 2 from WhatsApp. Unfortunately, we can't share images on with this program. I would like a QR code, if you guys don't mind. I mean, I can do the normal addresses later, which I will. I'll make sure everyone gets. But if you can tweet or email me a QR code, that'll be much easier, because it's just quicker. Because I'm going to send from my phone. So let me open my wallet here. Thanks, Muzi. Muzi is just I don't know if you guys have this, but otherwise just go to that bitcoinpaperwallet.com if you don't have it, and then get your address there. You can just generate one. You'll see it's a bit weird. You have to move your mouse around for like 30 seconds before you get an address. And the reason for that is to create a random seed, so that no one can copy your address. For someone to then generate the same address as you, they have to move their mouse around in exactly the same manner and exactly the same speed for 30 seconds, which we assume is impossible. It's completely random. That's why you have to do that.
Carl, can we just confirm your email address? Is it the Gmail, carldj@gmail.com?
You can either do Gmail or the one that I posted there, which is my Blockchain Academy address. If you have my Gmail address, I didn't post it on the slide, but you're welcome to send it to my Gmail address as well. Okay, I'm not sure, maybe my emails are not updating. Okay, yeah, I got something from Rendani. Thanks, Rendani. Oh, don't worry, Muzi. I understand you. This is a little bit complicated. What I will do is you'll understand what it's all about, and you can always if this is too complicated for you to do right away now, I mean, just send me an email or something afterwards, and I'll help you generate an address so that you can get your Bitcoin. Oh, my screen space is not enough. I only have so much screen space, and now I have to try and view this QR code here from Lendani so I can send him some Bitcoin. Thanks, Lendani. I'm gonna send it to you once I manage to view it. All right. I'm just unlocking my wallet now. I'm gonna send to Rendani. Okay. I'm gonna send you, Rendani, I'm gonna send you 5,000 Satoshis. By the way, a Satoshi is 1/100 millionth of a Bitcoin. Okay, I just sent Rendani 5,000 Satoshis. So, now, let's look at this. You guys are supposed to see, you can see there's my email. That's when Rendani sent me his QR code, and I just sent him some Satoshi. So let's look at this. This website that I'm using here is blockchain.com. This is a visual representation of the blockchain. It's a visual representation, therefore, of the Bitcoin ledger. Because remember, I don't think I've mentioned this before. The blockchain is the ledger. This ledger that I'm talking about that contains every single Bitcoin transaction that's ever happened, that is, the blockchain is just broken down into blocks, of which a new one is added every 10 minutes. And that is why you need to mine, you need to waste electricity in order to write to this ledger in order to create a block to add to this ledger. And one block is just similar to a spreadsheet that contains transactions. I just refreshed the page, and now you can see there's a transaction. Where is it? Is it that one or that one? Oh, it's this one. The 1st of April, 10:41. There's the transaction that I just did. There's my 5,000 Satoshis that I sent to Rendani. There's his address. Let's look at that address. Thanks, I'm seeing the emails coming through now. I see Akona, Lisa, Rendani, Yao, Justin, Zamukwake. Thanks, guys. I'm going to send all of you a little bit of Bitcoin later, okay? And then tomorrow you can give me some feedback if you want, or even later today as we finish. No, obviously not later today. I'm only going to do it after the training. So tomorrow you can give me some feedback as to your experience of receiving a little bit of Bitcoin. And there's a few things that I want you to take note of. So I'll come back to now. This is a transaction that I sent to Rendani. You can see it's there immediately. It's very, very quick. This transaction is not yet included in the blockchain. As we said, every 10 minutes transactions are included in the blockchain. So it's not yet, but here it is. You can see the total amount of Bitcoin received. The fee, obviously I pay a little bit of a fee that I needed to pay to the miner who's going to mine this transaction. And okay, there's lots of statistics that you can now go and look at. So take a screenshot of this if you want to, then go and type this address into your browser, go to blockchain.com, type this address, and then go play around here if you want to. And then even for those guys who've been around for a while, Paresh, Kriyan, you guys, all the rest of you, if you want a nice challenge, go and try and invade my privacy here. I always try to get people to do that, you know. So what you can do is one thing that I want you to notice is that there's complete transparency here. Anyone in the world can go and verify this transaction, can go look at this transaction, go check it out, and then go back. So now, how you do that, for those of you who are interested, is you see that the address that you see there is the one where it came from. So that's where I sent to. That was my wallet, and that's Arendani's wallet, that one, the 17WK. So if you go to my wallet, you can go back into my history. This was my wallet, and you can go. This was the transaction that I just sent to Arendani. This was the transaction that funded my wallet. So you can go back and back and back, and you can go back all the way, and you can go and invade my privacy and see my financial history. Very interesting. I don't mind if you do that. I use best practices, so I only allow you to see what I want you to see. So I do not mix my wallets with each other so that people can actually you know, see how much Bitcoin I own in the end, which is not a lot, unfortunately. But many people don't do that. But go and check out my history if you want to. And then send me a message. Tell me what you think of it. Okay. Now, why did I do this? Why did I send you guys some Bitcoin? And why I'm going to send you guys some more Bitcoin as time goes on? Well, after this training. The reason is I wanted you to experience something. I wanted you to experience the okay, wait, okay, I see a couple guys want me to post their address in the questions bar. What I'll do is when I send you guys, I'm not going to do that. When I send you guys Bitcoin later, you'll have my address. If you go to blockchain.com, then you can go and check out your transaction, the one that I sent to you, and then you can get my address from there. So the reason why I wanted you to obviously go through this process is so that you can experience the trust model. So if you started from scratch now and you generated a Bitcoin address using that website that I gave you, bitcoinpaperwallet.com. I'm not talking about Luno or any exchange address. I'm talking about starting from scratch, creating your own Bitcoin address to which you can send money. I need you to see the resources that you required to do that, and compare that to a formal conventional financial system that we are used to. Compare that to opening a bank account. Now, as I said earlier, the World Bank said that there's fewer bank accounts this year than there was last year. And the main reason for that is identity, is a lack of identity. It's KYC and AML processes that prohibits people from actually opening a bank account. More than half of the world today still does not have bank accounts. And the reason for that, the main reason for that is they do not have a proper identity. Now, what does identity really mean? Well, it means that you do not have a proper proof of residence, you do not have a proper place of residence, and you do not have a proper ID or an ID number. Maybe you are not registered on the government's database as a resident. Now, in South Africa, we have that problem, but we do not have it to such a great extent. Although, obviously, in the townships, it's very, very difficult to actually get hold of a proof of residence. Maybe not the people who are attending here today, but maybe we know some people that do not have a real proof of residence, and therefore they cannot open a bank account. But I can tell you that in the rest of Africa and in many Asian countries, that is a massive, massive problem. And that is why people are shown the door when they are trying to open bank accounts, because they do not have a proper identity and they cannot comply to KYC regulations. Now, doing one KYC check, and that is what I mean by a KYC check is a FICA check, for a bank to do a check on your proof of residence and your identity cost them in the region of 1,300 Rand. Can you believe it? It's expensive, right, to do that background check. Now, if you are a poor person and you cannot bring in at least that amount of revenue to the bank, then obviously they're not going to take that risk in giving you a bank account. I mean, it doesn't make business sense. So it excludes many people from a formal banking system. And if you cannot even have a bank account, how can you ever lift yourself out of poverty? How can you ever build wealth, and especially generational wealth? It is impossible, right? So that's why what I want you to realize is the amazing ability of this technology to bank the unbanked. I didn't need any form of identity when I went to bitcoinpaperwallet.com and created a public address. When you do that, you've basically created a bank account for yourself. You did not just create a bank account, you basically created a whole bank for yourself, because you can keep money in your pocket. Now, that is just one tool, bitcoinpaperwallet.com. Obviously, it's not the ultimate tool, and it's not the safest tool to use. So don't go use that tool, bitcoinpaperwallet.com, and now put thousands of rands on there. It's just a quick and easy tool to onboard someone to the Bitcoin blockchain so they can experience what it's all about. And then when I sent that transaction out to Rendani, what trust was required when we did that? Where does the trust lie? And I want you to answer me on this one. So we know that when we do an EFT, we've discussed it thoroughly, that when we do an EFT, the bank is critical as an intermediary because the ledger needs to be updated, and both the parties in the transaction needed to trust the bank. Where does the trust then lie when I just sent Rendani that transaction? Who did we trust? Anyone can answer me on that one. Trust in the Bitcoin transfer rests in the ledger. Session? No one. Martin? Yeah. So I would argue that there is probably a little bit of trust, but there is not trust in any single entity. Derek, you said trust in a blockchain. Correct. Now, what is the blockchain and the network? Trust in the integrity of the process. Correct, Sishan. So the Bitcoin blockchain consists of many, many entities. All these millions of computers hosting the blockchain, like I do myself as well. All the miners, of which there are millions as well, and they're all anonymous. They obviously waste electricity to write to the blockchain. The trust lies in all of them. But the difference is that this ledger is completely transparent. So anyone in the world can go and become a miner or host the blockchain itself and verify that that transaction actually did take place, and the accuracy of that transaction as well through some clever cryptography. You can verify that ledger entry was actually accurate, and it's not just me and Rendani who does that and go and verify that, but everyone can do it. Even the regulator trusts that that ledger is 100% accurate, that transaction actually did take place, that I was the rightful owner of that Bitcoin, and all of those questions. So there's no single point of failure. There's no single point of trust. Trust lies in the entire network. It is a collective social consensus that is reached as to whether that transaction actually happened or not. Oh, and there's the questions that I just asked you guys. How difficult was onboarding compared to opening a bank account? That's where the identity question is very important. Ask yourself that identity question. What identity information did you need to provide to open that bank account? Who did the sender trust? Who did the receiver trust? We talked about that. And then how was that trust achieved? And let's analyze that transaction. You guys can go to blockchain.com and analyze that transaction. There you go. There's let me just wait for the slide to be updated. there you can go. There you go. That's the block explorer. That's where we analyze this transaction. Pedumi says, easy, this will help a country like South Africa, for sure. And let me now quickly get to that question that Rick asked this morning, in which he asked, the primary function of the South African Reserve Bank is controlling the money supply within the economy. With Bitcoin, the South African Reserve Bank will lose its power to control money supply. Can the SARB or Treasury force you to use their digital currency, or let's say they create one of their own, as a medium of exchange through legislation instead of using Bitcoin as a medium of exchange? Now, you asked what this will do to the South African Reserve Bank, and I must not step on toes here. You know, I mustn't be too controversial, but my thoughts are that it is actually substantial consequences for any central bank, including the South African Reserve Bank, because luckily we are in a country where it's not outrightly banned, but the use of Bitcoin or the use of cryptocurrencies. But even if it were outright banned, we would still have the choice to use it. Nothing can prevent you from it. I mean, we've seen it in countries like North Korea and China where the internet is banned. I mean, it is banned, but nothing prevents anyone from still accessing the internet. So it is not legal tender in South Africa, which means that a merchant is not forced to accept Bitcoin when you try to buy something from them, but that does not mean that it is illegal to accept it. So anyone can, if they want to accept Bitcoin as a medium of exchange, then they are allowed to, but they are not forced. And yes, some people regard Bitcoin as a kind of a safe haven because it has a fixed monetary policy and as a hedge to their local currency, which no local currency in the world has a fixed monetary policy. Governments can obviously anywhere in the world print as much as they want. So whether that is a good thing or a bad thing depends on your view of macroeconomics. I don't want to go into that too much. You can go and read up about it. There's many economists commenting about Bitcoin's monetary policy compared to central banks' monetary policy around the world. We have millions who are unbanked, and the 1,300 Rand for FICA can just be spent on smartphone for anyone who wants to use crypto. That's a good point, Padume. Can you reverse the Bitcoin you sent? Oh man, Amanda, I am so glad you asked that, because that is a very, very important point for the use in Bitcoin. Can you reverse the Bitcoin that you send? And we'll get to that now when we talk about the blockchain, because that it is one of the most important characteristics of any blockchain is the fact that it is immutable. So as you guys saw in the when I showed you my transactions that I just did to Rendani, that it is completely transparent. Anyone can go and audit it, and there's some tools out there for auditing transactions. Some of these used to be free, and I used to go into them and I showed the attendees exactly what it looks like, but unfortunately they are not free anymore. But you can go and Google some of these. All of these things that you see are just visual representations of the blockchain and how the money is flowing from one wallet to the next. This was also a cool one which was on blockchain.com, but it's not there anymore, unfortunately. Man, I love this tool where the bubbles appear, that you can see each and every bubble. You can see where the you can actually trace the Bitcoin from one address to the next, which made it very easy for legal authorities and fraud, what do they call it, and the regulator and so on to actually audit these transaction flows. The one that you see on the next screen, that one there, this is actually the pizza transaction, the one that I told you guys about. Okay, now we're going to go into blockchain. We talked about Bitcoin, and you guys understand Bitcoin now, at least on a very high level. You guys have experienced it with me now, and some of you will experience it a little bit later today after the training, when I will send you a little bit of Bitcoin. And then when you receive that Bitcoin, please answer those questions that I asked. Onboarding and trust. Answer those questions for yourself. Please do not please do not send me a wallet address from an exchange, because the trust model for an exchange like Luna or Altcoin Trader or whatever is completely different from the trust model and the onboarding process of you generating your own address. It's very important that you generate your own address for you to be able to answer those questions. So now we can go a little bit deeper into the rabbit hole and see what the blockchain is and how it works in the background. Because ultimately, I want you guys to walk away with real use cases of this technology and ideas of how to apply it in your own organizations. Now, so what we have learned so far is not really very useful to your own organization. So, so that's where the blockchain part plays a big role. And as I said, the Bitcoin blockchain is a master ledger that contains every single transaction that has ever happened. A new block is appended to the blockchain every 10 minutes. It's connected to the previous one. Very important. How does it look? Well, this is what it actually looks like. This is a visual representation of the blockchain. Let me just get my spotlight here, then you can see. So every block is, what we are seeing here is block number 51, block number 52, 53, and 54. Okay. This is typically, so there's currently about 600,000 blocks in the Bitcoin blockchain. So, because obviously every 10 minutes a new one gets added, and the old ones never gets wiped away. Now, what does these blocks contain? First of all, it contains the proof of work. Remember what the proof of work is? Who can remember? It is the solution to the Sudoku puzzle. The solution to the Sudoku puzzle. And it is also a fingerprint. It is a fingerprint of this entire block. It's like the DNA of this block. So if you can imagine, I am here, I don't know what I want to say how much I weigh, but let's just say, for argument's sake, I weigh 80 kilograms. All right. I am here as an 80 kilogram male. I'm quite heavy, therefore. And, you know, there's a lot of stuff in me. I'm a big person. But my DNA is only 70 megabytes big. Okay, I think that's the size of the human DNA. I actually Googled it last night, knowing that I'm going to have this conversation with you guys. So my DNA is 70 megabytes in size. Although I am much bigger than 70 megabytes. I mean, check this. You see, I'm a big guy. So my DNA is much smaller than me myself, but my DNA contains every single aspect of me. All right, it contains everything. It's like my fingerprint. My fingerprint's the same. If you change me, my fingerprint changes, but my fingerprint's much smaller than the rest of my body, and so is my DNA. It's much smaller than the rest of me. All right, but you change something of me, my DNA changes. Now that is exactly what you see there. So that proof of work is not only the solution to the Sudoku puzzle, it is also the DNA or the fingerprint of the entire block. Okay. Now, inside that fingerprint is also the fingerprint of the previous block. So block number 52 contains the fingerprint of block number 51. And so does block number 53. It contains the fingerprint of block number 52. And it contains its own fingerprint. And so on and so on. So, one of you guys asked, who was it that asked? Can I reverse? Amandla asked, can you reverse a transaction that of a Bitcoin that he sent? Now let's think about this for a while. Block number 52, as we said, each block contains about 2,000 transactions. Now let's say Amandla bought a car in block number 52, and he paid 1 Bitcoin for that car. All right, and that's the transaction there, the one that I'm highlighting here now. That's a transaction in which Amandla bought a new car or second-hand car from his neighbor for 1 Bitcoin. Now, as he drove off with that car, he obviously sent a Bitcoin when he bought it. As he drove off, 20 minutes later, block number 54 was already mined, and suddenly this engine exploded. All right, and now Amandla is not very happy because obviously he paid a full Bitcoin, which you guys know how much that is. That's 120,000 rand for a car which of which the engine just exploded. So he's not very happy. So he thinks, well, I'm going to go back and I'm going to change my transaction to half a Bitcoin because, you know, 1 full Bitcoin for a car that does not have an engine anymore was way too much. I think half a Bitcoin is a fair price. At least I still have the seats, you know. And so he goes back and he changes. He also runs a full node, just like I do. So he goes and hacks into his computer and change this transaction to half a Bitcoin. What's going to happen now? Well, if you change any of the transactions inside this block, you're going to change the fingerprint or the DNA of this block. And once you change the DNA, everyone in the world can see that you have not burnt the electricity. You have not spent, the amount of money that you were supposed to spend to write to this ledger or to write to this block. And on top of that, what's going to happen is the DNA of block number 53 is going to change because it contains the DNA of block number 52. And so is the DNA of block number 54. That's also going to change because it contains the DNA of block number 53. So you can see that it has a ripple effect. And it will keep changing all the blocks on top of it up to block number 600,000 where we are currently on the Bitcoin blockchain. Now, so what happens then? Well, everyone is going to ignore your copy of the blockchain, your copy of the ledger. The network is not going to be in consensus about the correct copy of this blockchain. So the only way that Amandla can actually reverse that transaction or change that transaction is by actually burning the electricity again. It's by remining this block. That's what mining is. It's burning the electricity. He needs to remine this block. And when you remine this block and spend millions of rands of electricity to mine a block, because that's the amount required to actually mine a single block, when he changed this one, then he needs to remine now block number 53, and then he needs to remine block number 54, and all the blocks on top of that. And when he did that, and he stuck to the protocol, and he managed to remine all of the blocks on top of it and spend all that electricity, I'm just trying to make this as short as possible, then the network will go and look and say, well, here is an alternative blockchain, one that has an alternative transaction where Amandla actually only spent half a Bitcoin instead of a full Bitcoin, and they would regard that copy of the blockchain as the correct one. Now, in practical terms, this is impossible because for you to do that, you have to have at least 50% or more of the total mining power protecting the network, which is a lot of computational power. It basically amounts to more computational power, more than 100 times the amount of computational power that Google has in their possession. That will give you 50% of the mining power, and that is the only way that you can actually change a historic transaction. Because the network, all of the miners, all of the nodes, including my node on my computer, will always look at the one that contains the most proof of work, the longest chain, therefore, the blockchain that has burnt the most electricity, and we regard that one as the correct one. Now that is called the consensus mechanism, and that is what proof of work is all about. Okay, consensus mechanism means that everyone in this network, because remember it's a permissionless network, anyone can join. There's no central authority telling you which copy of the blockchain or which copy of the ledger is the correct one. So everyone needs to agree, and the rules say that the one that contains the most proof of work is the correct one. That's the correct version of the blockchain. And that is called consensus. That is called being in consensus. Now, what this creates is a very, very special attribute called immutability. Immutability means resistance to change. So this blockchain that you see here on your screens is immutable because, as I said, you cannot go back in history and change something. You can, but it is extremely, extremely difficult. It is only theoretically possible. It is not practically possible to change any historic transaction in this blockchain. And that is one of the strongest attributes of a blockchain that you can get. And it opens up immense possibilities for other use cases as well. All of the use cases that we will be discussing tomorrow will be making use of this attribute of a blockchain. The fact that it is immutable. The fact that we have a digital record that works like a database that cannot be changed. The history of this database cannot be changed. The chronological order of it. That is a massive, massive advantage. Something that we have never had before in the history of computer science. Let me just delete my drawings there. Okay, so a blockchain works like a database. It's a range of Excel spreadsheets. It's a ledger to which you can add data. You can only write to the ledger. You cannot delete or update historic entries. Not in a public blockchain, at least. We're going to get to permission blockchain just now. It is distributed. As I said, millions of computers around the world host this blockchain, and it is distributed, decentralized in its purest form. So decentralization means that decentralization is a relative concept. So, I mean, obviously there are people that mine more than others. There are big mining companies around the world that have warehouses full of computers solving these Sudoku puzzles. So it is centralized to some extent, but it is probably the most decentralized network that has ever existed. Okay. Which means that it does not have a single point of failure. Even if you take out 10 of these big warehouses and control 10 or 100 of them even, you would still not have control over the network because it is decentralized to such an extent that it is impossible for one single entity to take control over the network. One extra part that I just need to mention is the use of public and private keys, and that is just a way to prove that you are the owner of a certain Bitcoin, that you are the owner of a certain piece of data. I'm not going to delve into this very deep now. Okay. So as I said, there are many role players in a decentralized ledger such as Bitcoin. And there you can see the difference between centralized, decentralized, and distributed. Bitcoin is distributed. Some other type of blockchains are more centralized or perhaps more decentralized than distributed. Now, we did talk about mining. It is the action or the practice of solving a difficult mathematical problem similar to a Sudoku puzzle, verifying each transaction, making sure that whoever sent that transaction was actually the rightful owner and that they didn't create Bitcoin out of thin air. And miners are rewarded in Bitcoin, which has a monetary value to it, usually more than what they spent in electricity to actually write to the ledger, to have the privilege to write to the ledger. Okay, I'm going to skip a couple slides there because we already covered that. Consensus mechanism. So proof of work is Bitcoin's consensus mechanism. It is the practice of burning through electricity to show that you did spend money so that you can write to a ledger. But not obviously that would not make sense in a private blockchain, for instance, which we're going to get to now, because a private blockchain is different from a public blockchain in that it is almost compared to intranet instead of internet. You know, it's a blockchain that's created for your organization only, and I mean that would be stupid to just burn through electricity. Imagine how hot your offices would be if every person that is involved in your blockchain just races to see who can burn the most electricity. So you can just take a screenshot of that if you want to research some of the other means of reaching consensus. All right, so distributed nodes and transaction flows. So this is basically just how a Bitcoin transaction happened. When I sent that Bitcoin to Rendani earlier, basically what happens is that transaction goes to a node. That node checks whether that transaction is valid and then communicates it to other nodes. Nodes being computers that host the blockchain, that has a copy of the entire ledger on their computer, and so it is flooded all the way to the recipient. Now, in a permissionless network, which is like Bitcoin, you do not require permission, obviously, from anyone to join the network, either as a node or as a miner. Anyone can do it, as long as you stick to the protocol rules. You can do whatever. You can try and hack the system. You can try and bend the rules. You can do whatever. No one has ever been able to do that successfully. We know what the attack surfaces are, and no one has been able to exploit those. And if you the reason why I'm showing you this picture is just to we're going to get back to it in 5 minutes as to show how it changes with a permission blockchain. So a blockchain characteristics. I have hopefully managed to convince you that a blockchain does not have a single point of failure. It is immutable and it is distributed. Obviously, we haven't had time to explore these concepts in great detail. You can go and read up about it a little bit more, or attend one of the more advanced courses if you want to explore these concepts in a bit more detail. So I can really prove to you that that is the case, that there is no single point of failure, that is immutable, and that it is distributed. But hopefully I could convince you guys to some extent that that is indeed the fact, because these characteristics, no single point of failure, immutability, and the fact that it is distributed or decentralized, is very, very important. All of the use cases that we're going to be talking about rest on top of these characteristics here. And if the blockchain does not have these characteristics, then you have to really question whether that blockchain is able to solve any unique problem at all. And then the fourth characteristic is that it is permissionless, open, transparent, borderless, censorship resistant, and that there is no barrier to entry. And that I showed you guys through the transaction that I did to Rendani. Rendani did not need permission to open a Bitcoin account. It was completely open. It was completely transparent. We looked at the blockchain. It was completely borderless. It would not have mattered if Rendani was my neighbor or if he would have been on the other side of the world. The blockchain does not even know borders. It's like the internet. You don't know the difference between sending an email to your neighbor or sending an email to the other side of the world. It's exactly the same. You don't even think about it. It is censorship resistant. No one could have censored my transaction. No one could have prevented me from doing that. And there was almost no barriers to entry. There was a small barrier in the fact that you actually had to have a smartphone or something to generate the address from. You had to be connected to the internet, perhaps, although theoretically the receiver of the Bitcoin is not supposed to be connected, but that's a discussion for another day. But I put question marks on that because that characteristic is not present in permission blockchains, permission private blockchains, which we'll discuss now in a few minutes. Now, the bad thing about blockchain technology is that it is slow and inefficient. I mean, if you think about the way we used to do banking or the way banking works is if I send some money to another person, there's only one packet of data being communicated, or maybe let's say 2 or 3 packets of data being communicated. It's my machine as the merchant communicating to the bank, and the bank may be communicating to another bank, and that bank communicating back to the buyer. I mean, sending him an SMS or whatever. You see, and that's it, and the transaction just went through. Now, if you think about a blockchain, if you think about Bitcoin, for example, there's millions of computers having needing to update their ledgers. So the packets of data required for that transaction to be successful is millions as well, because they all need to communicate to each other. That makes it slow, inefficient. It needs to be slow as well to keep it decentralized. Also a discussion for another day. It is very expensive when you compare it to a database. It is very cheap if you compare it to conventional banking, but that is just because banks charge you for trust, whereas in a blockchain, you get that trust for free. But if you compare it to a normal database, MySQL database or anything like that, it's very expensive. And it is technically complex to actually build a blockchain. It's not so easy. Now, this is what a permission blockchain, a permission network basically looks like. There's no miners, obviously, because mining, the only objective of mining is to burn through electricity and to create immutability of the blockchain in that way. Now, in a permissioned network, you only have nodes that keep a copy of the database or the ledger, and you build a firewall around it, and anyone that wants to participate in your network needs permission. You can always compare it to intranet. You cannot be part of a company's intranet if you do not have permission from the moderator of that intranet. But basically, the idea of a permission blockchain is to have the characteristics of immutability, distribution or decentralization, and no single point of failure. That is why you would use a permission network. Although a permission network takes away a lot of the magic that a permissionless network has. Because if you think about it, the magic of a permissionless open network is the fact that it is 100% accurate, even though anyone can join. I mean, that is just pure magic. It is the fact that it cannot be hacked and it cannot be reversed, even though anyone can join. That is magic. You know, permission networks do not have that. They can theoretically reverse transactions, so it is not 100% immutable. But it does solve many niche problems, you know, and we're going to talk about those problems probably tomorrow. So permissioned networks basically were developed in a much later than permissionless network, much later than Bitcoin, around about 2014, 2015. That's when corporates saw this technology. They saw that it has very much potential, and they decided to, but they didn't like the openness and the transparency of public open blockchains, so they that's why they created permission blockchains. Okay, I'm going to skip a couple slides so that we can finish off because I only have 8 minutes left. Smart contracts. A smart contract is basically a piece of software that lives on top of the blockchain. So it makes use of all these wonderful characteristics of a blockchain, which is immutability, the fact that nothing can ever be reversed, the fact that it is completely safe, the fact that it does not require permission, and that it is censorship resistant. So it's a piece of software that lives on top of the blockchain. Okay, and that piece of software basically asks a few questions: if, condition, then operation, just like any other piece of simple software, and it makes decisions on your on behalf, not on behalf of anyone, because no one actually owns a smart contract. Not supposed to own a smart contract. It's supposed to be a self-executing piece of software that will execute into oblivion forever, exactly as coded, and no one is able to change that smart contract. That's in any case how it's supposed to be. Now, if you think about a real-life smart contract, the simplest smart contract that we probably know of is a debit order. So a debit order is just a piece of software that says every first of the month, so much money needs to be deducted from this account and sent to another account. Vending machine is also a smart contract. If you put in R2, you get a Coke, back in the good old days. So that is also a smart contract, but it can get much more complex. It is deterministic, meaning that it will play out exactly the same way every single time. And the cool thing about it is it can actually include dispute resolution processes. So many people are always afraid of real life things that can happen, things that you cannot code into a smart contract, but a smart contract can include dispute resolution functions as well, but we unfortunately don't have time to go into that today. It's very interesting. Okay, I'm going to give you one example of a permissioned network, where a permissioned network works much better than a private network, and that is through the process of immigration control. So if you think about it, immigration control is, immigration is probably the most ridiculous thing that we as humans do today. The fact that if you go to another country, you are completely reliant on a piece of paper for your well-being is, to me, absolutely crazy. In this digital age that we live in today, if you lose your passport, you are screwed. And you know, that is quite crazy. And so think about how a immigration type of network would work. So you would create a network, and every country in the world would run a node that hosts a database of where every single citizen in the world is at any point in time. And you would then load a smart contract on top of this permissioned network that basically asks you 3 questions, and then determines whether you are allowed to go through the border or not. Are you in the country that you're trying to exit? That's the first question that the smart contract will ask. If the answer is no, then you are denied entry. If you answer yes, and are you allowed in the country that you're trying to enter? If the answer is no, then you're denied. If the answer is yes, then you would ask maybe a few follow-up questions like travel sanctions, criminal records, visa requirements, those kind of things. If the answer is yes, then you are approved, and we make a ledger entry. Now, why is this supposed to be on a blockchain and not on a normal database? Well, the reason is a blockchain enables us to reach consensus over the state of a ledger or a database, which means that every country in the world, just like we can all agree on whether the Bitcoin blockchain is accurate or not, we can use another type of consensus mechanism, one that does not require us to burn through electricity, to reach agreement on whether a person is in a certain country or not, even with countries that do not trust each other. I mean, if we look at Bitcoin, I do not trust my neighbor who might also run a Bitcoin node. But even though I don't trust him, we can both agree that both of our copies of the Bitcoin node, of the Bitcoin blockchain, is exactly the same, and it is exactly accurate. So we can use that attribute of consensus and plug it into a permissioned blockchain, and then North Korea and America, even though they hate each other, they can both agree that a certain person is in a country or is not in a country, and the smart contract can run deterministically to determine whether that person is allowed to enter or exit a certain border. I hope that makes sense. I am rushing this a little bit. I apologize for that. It's because I'm falling up behind in time. Okay, and then tomorrow, hopefully, I'm not sure how much time we're going to have tomorrow, because tomorrow there are a lot of speakers as well. But we're going to talk about asset tokenization. I'm going to show you how to embed additional data onto the Bitcoin blockchain. For instance, I'm just talking about Bitcoin here, as I said, just so that you can see how it all works and use the immutability of a blockchain like Bitcoin to tokenize assets. And that is a wonderful and a very, very, very exciting use case for blockchain. And we're going to show timestamping. Timestamping is incredible as well. So think about it this way. We have a chronological monument of digital data that is completely immutable and can never ever be changed. Now, what I did to show you the power of that is that I took this certificate, which I received in May of 2018, and I put that onto the Bitcoin blockchain. And by doing that, I can prove to anyone in the entire world, no one can dispute it, that I was in possession of this file, of this certificate, at that time, because it's impossible for anyone to change the time at which I put this certificate onto the blockchain. Now, of course, you need a little bit of additional tools to prove authentication of this document. I mean, Stanford, where I received this certificate, obviously needs to prove that the certificate is authentic, and they can also do that on top of the Bitcoin blockchain. And if they do that, then it is undisputed that I was the owner of the certificate, this legit certificate at that time. And that is a timestamp. There is actually the transaction that I did. You can see there I also used blockchain.info, the transaction where I embedded the certificate onto the blockchain. And anyone in the world can now go and verify, anyone, because it's completely transparent, can verify that I am the owner of that certificate. Let's take it further. Let's make it real. Let's apply to insurance for instance. So this was my car that I bumped, and I just uploaded a picture of the bump to the Bitcoin blockchain. Now imagine my car had the ability, I had maybe a computer inside my car that did this automatically through the Internet of Things. And it automatically uploaded the fact that I bumped my car onto a blockchain that is completely immutable and that no one can ever change. Then my insurance provider can be absolutely sure that this is not a fraudulent claim, that my car was indeed bumped, and it can be 100% sure of the time that this accident happened. It's impossible for me to fake this, okay? There's obviously a little bit more, it's a little bit more complex than just that, but I just wanted to quickly show you the ability of an immutable system. I see I've run out of time now, so we will see each other again tomorrow. I will be distributing that Bitcoin to each and every one of you like I promised. And I hope you learned a lot today. Go and digest some of this information. It is a lot. I know it's a bit of an overload. And if you manage to stay awake through this 2.5 hours, well done. And let's connect. I would like to get to know each and every one of you. So let's connect on social media or wherever. And I really hope that I get to meet each and every one of you in real life in future. Thank you, guys.
Carl, thanks so much. It's really regrettable that we have to stop now because it's been fascinating. You're a mine of information, and such really deep knowledge is very valuable to all of us. But I'm going to draw this to a close now. I think there's been great engagement. We've had 55 people attending this today, which is really wonderful for an online course of this nature. Just to reiterate what Carl said, we're going to carry on tomorrow. We'll start again at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning, like we did today. And we'll have some more content from Carl, and then we'll go into the use cases. And just to go through who we're expecting tomorrow to be speaking, we've got lined up Professor Copier George from the University of Cape Town, who's going to be talking about blockchain in academic programs and certification, and the idea of self-sovereign identification. Monica Singer from Consensus will be talking about blockchain use cases in the public sector, specifically with things like land registration, supply chain traceability, and voting and governance. Gugu Newman will be talking about blockchain in health, and Ilana Meltzer about the use of blockchain in registering and recording property ownership. So there's a lot of, there's a far distance to go in 2.5 hours, but a huge amount of information and real applications of blockchain. So we hope you'll join us again tomorrow, 9 a.m. In the meantime, we'll share the recording and the content from today with you all, and hope to see you tomorrow. Thanks so much.
Bye, guys.